Welcome to Killer Women with your host, best-selling author Danielle Girard. And now, Danielle's next killer woman.
Hello, and welcome to Killer Women Podcast, a proud member of the Authors on the Air global network with more than 4 million listeners. I am your host, suspense author Danielle Girard, and my guest today is Katia Lief. Katia teaches fiction writing at the New School in Manhattan and lives with her family in Brooklyn. She is the author of The Invisible Woman and, most recently, Women Like Us. Her earlier works include A Map of the Dark and Last Night, published under the pseudonym Karen Ellis, as well as USA Today and internationally best-selling novels 5 Days in Summer, One Cold Night, and The Money Kill, which was nominated for the Mary Higgins Clark Award. Welcome, Katia.
Hi, Danielle. Nice to be here.
So I was lucky enough to get to read Katia's first book, Killer Women, we are on Killer Women. Invisible Woman, and then Women Like Us together because they're connected. I would say you could read them. You can totally read them separately. They can stand on their own. But it was really fun to read Invisible Woman first, and then get to follow up with Women Like Us. So why don't you tell us about these fabulous stories? I guess
Okay.
yeah, start with because I feel like we should introduce Joni and Val in
Okay.
Invisible Woman.
That's a good order. So in Invisible Woman, Joni Ackerman is a kind of once filmmaker who had been celebrated in her early career as a filmmaker, whose career had just faded. And as her career faded, her husband's career exploded as a TV mogul, as the golden age of TV really got going. And the book opens when they've made a big move from LA to Brooklyn, New York, where he's going to run a new studio in Steiner Studios, where if you happen to live in New York, you know that that's what we have it's a big TV production studio. Very big place, a lot going on. Um, I set it there, and I have them living in a huge house near there, called the Commandant's house, which is a real house,
Fun.
um, that I discovered on a bike ride one day, and I couldn't believe how this incredible white mansion was sitting on a vast lawn on the edge of Brooklyn. I said, "What is this?" And I looked it up, and I had them living there, because he's a real big deal now, and she's been dragged out of her home in LA, and she's living in New York. So the book opens with her being invited to a kind of a film to participate in a film retrospective about lost and forgotten women filmmakers, and that just gets her. The lost and forgotten. That's
Of
just
course,
stab
of
me in the
course.
heart. Stab, and she's thinking about that, and at the same time, a big Hollywood scandal explodes, which is so the book is set in 2018. It's a Me Too scandal in the vein of Harvey Weinstein,
Totally.
and of course she and her husband know the guy. So the book follows Joni as that story, which is at that time a news story, sort of explodes, and her marriage starts to come apart as she and her husband try to navigate the fallout from this big news story. Um, so she, in the meantime, is really obsessed with Patricia Highsmith.
Yes.
Those of
Yes.
you who know the work of Patricia Highsmith and have an obsession about it will get this. And
Yes.
if you don't, and if you haven't read her, do read her. She's just one of the greatest um, crime writers, and she's a literary stylist like nobody else.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. And it's
and
and
she,
she
yeah,
falls beautifully into this as you said before we started recording, this sort of female rage is really the
oh,
at the core of the both of these stories. And so we pick up
right,
with Joni in Women Like Us, and we won't
yes,
talk too much more about what happens in Invisible Woman because
yeah,
you want to read that, and it is super, super fun to read. And a very satisfying ending. And then in this book, and Val, her friend Val, she's sort of reunites with in Invisible Woman because now she's living closer. Val's in New Jersey.
Hmm.
And these two pick up, and actually they start to be working together in Women Like Us. And what shows up in for Joni in Women Like Us is her brother, who is
Right.
a troubled character. So tell me, like, first of all, I'm
Okay.
curious with this because I'm always curious about how series happen or how connected
Okay.
books happen. When you wrote Invisible Woman, did you imagine a second story for it, or was that sometimes it's the publisher who's like, "We love this. What can how do you spring out?
Yeah.
How did this book come from that book?"
Um, I think it was in the back of my mind. I didn't have a plan. Um, but after I finished the book, this question about, and I won't say what happens because it's a major spoiler if I do, but the question of how does Joni
Yeah,
deal with what happens? I mean, it happened and there she is, but it's big. And if it were you, how would you process that?
right.
How would you go forward living with this thing in your mind and your past? So I opened the I Invisible Woman closes at the dawn of the pandemic. And
Yes.
yeah, and it opens after the so Women Like Us opens after the pandemic.
Yeah,
So it opens 5 years later. And I did that because I didn't want to write a pandemic novel.
I appreciate that. Also,
Yeah,
it gave Joni some time to get over what had been a
right.
major life change. Let's just put it that way. It
Yes.
was a major life
Yeah.
change. So
5 years of processing, and she's in a good place.
yes,
When her
until her
brother
brother shows up.
Well, her brother shows up. Um, and she has a long lost brother who she hasn't seen in 20 years because she hasn't wanted to see him. He was a horrible, menacing bully as a kid and as a teenager. And she, as a young adult, wanted no part of him. So she cut him out.
Yeah.
And it was mutual.
And
And
their
then one
parents
day,
had died, so it was easier, right? There
yes,
wasn't this whole familial connection.
no, there were no, so he shows up on her doorstep at the beginning of Women Like Us, and she's wary, but she begins to let him back in, and he stays with her. And her best friend Val, who at this point is working with her, so she is working with her, um, so is a close and constant presence, as is Joni's daughter Chris.
Yeah.
It's these three women. Um, Val, who knew the brother as teenager, said, keep away.
Yeah.
Guy's no good. Don't trust him. Don't be fooled. And Joni doesn't want to believe it. And so and Women Like Us follows the story of what happens. And I don't think it's a spoiler to say that the brother Mark, turns out to be not such a great guy.
Right. I don't know.
So,
And
and
we expect
his
that, right?
No, I think you know it the minute he shows up. Otherwise, there's no story to tell in
Right.
when you're writing the book. So, so it's really about Joni being pulled into her brother and his. She kind of identifies him as a dark triad personality, which is kind of the worst form of sociopathy. Um, and because of her own past, she begins to. So she's dealing with the stuff that he's bringing to her life now.
Yeah.
And at the same time, she's going back inward to where she was about at the end of Invisible Woman, no longer so sure she can really handle what happened in Invisible Woman,
Right.
and that she really can go forth as a good person.
Right.
So those two things are happening in Women Like Us. And yeah, so she has to
You
deal with her brother and her inner life too.
So you kind of it was you that sort of said, I have another idea for Joni. I want to go
Yep.
back and
Yes.
okay, so that's actually, I mean, it is really fun. And it sort of brings up the question, like, here Joni learned a very tough lesson. Joni and Val, actually, both, right? And
Yes.
together in their friendship learned some very good lessons in Invisible Woman, and yet here we are, like, back, and is this an innately female thing to be like, well, the past taught me that this guy is a total jackass, but maybe he's changed. I feel like this is a thing women do
I think
so
so.
much more than men.
Yeah.
Like, why do we do this? Where we're like, well, maybe he's different. And I feel
Yeah.
like here's Joni, who's like so smart, and yet, so short.
Why do we do it? Why
I
do we do it? Yet, but we do,
we do.
Um, less, I think, as the older we get and the more experience, but there's always the new thing coming at you that you can complicate in your mind
Right.
and decide to open up to. And I think I think women are good at complexity
Yeah.
and shades of gray in relationships, um, and vulnerable
Yeah.
because we want to trust,
I know.
I think.
I also think there's sort of societal, like, we are sort of set in a position where women are supposed to be like nurturers, right? So here's this, like, it's her brother,
Yeah,
or it was her husband, or it's her child. Like, we are
right,
sort of taught to be like, well, of course you have to take care. And there is also the sense that, and I think we see it with Mark, who's Joni's brother. Like, he's probably not quite got his shit together, right? Because he's a
right,
man.
right,
And who knows what he's done with his life. So there's a sense that, like, oh, but
right.
he needs my help, which of
Yeah,
course he does, like, in a
yeah,
major way. Whether or not he'll take it, or, I mean,
yeah,
that's the question, right?
right.
But we get lured into these situations where only in hindsight are we like, well, that was a dumb idea, right?
Right. Yes. And that whole question of set your boundaries. Yes, that's good. We do have to set our boundaries. But it's not always clear where that boundary is. And it's such a universal thing that so many women do, all of us, that I really, as a writer, it's there to explore, you
Yeah,
know,
it's such a
it's
it's
there to
right.
explore.
It's
Yeah.
a rich, rich well of material.
Rich territory. So I wanted to go there. So I wanted to
Yeah.
take Joni back there. Um, and by the end of the book, I'm not going to say what happens.
No, nor should you.
Yeah, but something happens.
Because something happens, and
Choice has to be made.
yes, and of
Almost
course,
yeah.
yeah, and of course, Joni's, she's learning another, important lesson. So
Yeah, yeah. So, and then she has the complexity of her relationship with her daughter.
yeah.
And not as she thinks a lot in the second book about what are family traits. Her brother is this way. What about the things Joni herself has done in the past, and what does that mean for her daughter who's around 30ish? What does that mean for her, and can she go through her life? Not Is it inevitable that she'll somehow that she harbors this family trait psychologically, or
Mhm.
can you overcome it by
Right.
dint of will? So yeah,
Yeah, it is really fun. And the sort of one of the things that we didn't haven't really explored in the Me Too movement is what it was like, for those people who were sort of, we knew about the victims of, like, like Weinstein, but not so much about the people who would sort of considered him a friend, or, the people
right,
who would have maybe turned a blind eye, or even theoretically not known, which is
right.
interesting, right? I mean, I think that begs a lot of wonderful questions. So where do we
Oh,
go from, oh, sorry.
no, no, I agree. I just want to agree. Yeah.
So where do we go from here? I'm curious. So what are you working on? I'm assuming you're working on another idea. Can
I'm
you
working
tell
on
me
a new
about
idea.
it? Hmm.
Right now I'm playing with a new idea, and it's not a Joni idea. I could keep, I've written series before, and
Yeah.
the thing with series, have you written series?
Yeah, I have. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's so great to just stay in them.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm not at the moment going to be going in that direction.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm I'm at the early stages of playing with something. I'm not 100% sure that that's what I'm going to stick with,
Mhm.
but right now I'm very into it. That's all I can say.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I totally understand.
How could I say more? Yeah.
Now, when we read your bio, you've had a lot of sort of lives as a writer, and I am somebody
Right.
who's also had a lot of lives as a writer. So I'm always curious to
Okay.
know and my lives have all happened in the same name, but there have been
Yeah.
many lives that
Okay.
nonetheless. So tell us about, when you started this. Now, have you always taught? And, when did you sell your first, how does it sort of work for you in this world? 'Cause I
Okay.
know, it's it's really, I think we have a lot of people on the podcast who listen to the podcast as aspiring authors or as
Okay.
authors in different stages in their lives. It's really good to hear
Yeah.
sort of, there's not one way to do this, and the road is long.
No, there's a million ways. And if you apply your imagination, you can do it in every way, like I have. Um,
Yes. Right.
so, for me, I think the complexity with my many names started, when I got married, which was 31 years ago, I did not change my name to Leaf. I just kept my name, which was Spiegelman. But when I got pregnant with our first child, which was only 4 months later, I had this strong feeling that I wanted to share a last name. So I added Leaf to my name. So that was the beginning of me having
Yeah.
a little extra complexity with my name situation. Um, so meanwhile, I had already published two small press literary novels
Okay.
and under my birth name, Katia Spiegelman. And then when and they weren't crime novels. So when time passed, I had a couple of kids. I was I really put my work on the back burner, and I was dying to get back to it. I was just had to get back to it. But because, everything's really shift. Anyone who has kids knows there were a lot of financial pressures. And I thought I want to try to write something more commercial so
Yeah.
that I can merge doing what I love, which is writing novels, with maybe I could earn a living at it.
Yes.
I could try. It's a skill.
Yeah.
So I decided to write suspense because of all the different elements in fiction. I found that one to be kind of at that moment the most slippery. I wanted to understand how it worked. How do you do suspense? How do you build and create suspense? So I decided to learn that by writing a suspense novel, and I studied up by reading a lot of other people's work and reading books about it.
Including Patricia Highsmith, I would imagine.
And oh my God, Patricia Highsmith is such a great teacher. She even wrote a book about writing
Oh,
suspense,
she
by the way.
did? I didn't know
Oh
that.
yes. It's a slim how-to book. You got to read it. You
That's
must
fine.
read it. If you like, okay. So then I wrote my first one. It took a while. I worked on it over and over and over and over. And I already had an agent from the past, and I had kind of gone dormant for several years, um, but he was still there, willing to work with me, and he did sell it. And he sold it in a 2-book contract. And it was at that point he said to me, what name do you want to use? And it had never occurred to me to use, it's like, I don't know, my name. It's like, oh, and he said, well, here's the thing. If this doesn't work, um, you could use a pseudonym, and if it doesn't work, we just cast it off to the side. And this literally happened within many days. The sale happened quickly. It really took me by surprise. It was maybe a 4-day process.
Oh,
It
wow.
was an auction.
So,
Um, it was the kind of money that it would equal like an income. So, I mean, it really kind of shocked me. I had been this literary writer, and I had, and it was in a territory of mystery writing that I really didn't know about. So I kind of impulsively glommed onto a pseudonym, which at the time was Kate Pepper.
oh,
Um,
fun.
you didn't even know that one, right?
I
And
didn't.
Pepper was the name of my childhood cat. And Kate is what
That's,
my name Katya means. And I
yeah,
did it really impulsively. And I said, what about Kate Pepper? And the next thing I mean, literally within, I don't know if even a day went by, my new editor had put like a notice out. It was happening crazy fast. And that became the name.
yeah.
So,
That's a great name. It's like gotta, I mean, it's a great name for as far as they go, right? I mean,
thank you. Yeah. Well, in retrospect, I look back, I think I should have just kept my name, my original name, and stuck with it. Because things have happened with the names, like when my first child was born, someone tried to send flowers and the hospital didn't know where to deliver them because the name that was on his tag was a different name. And it got so complicated from the beginning. And then when I started adding pseudonyms to it, it got more complex.
Yeah.
But I did publish 4 books under that pseudonym. Um, and they did okay. And in Germany, they were published in a few different countries, and in Germany they did extremely well. So the
Yeah.
name
The Germans love suspense, don't they? Isn't
they
that crazy?
do. They
Yeah.
do. So after 4 books, when I had I changed publishers and I had the option to drop it. They said, go either way, do what you want. I did, but in Germany, Kate Pepper lived on for several more books. So things I would publish here under my name would come out there as Kate Pepper. And even just the other day, I signed a kind of an extension of an ebook sub license for Kate Pepper. And at dinner the other
They
night,
don't
I said,
die,
Kate
right?
Pepper made some money today. And it wasn't much, but it was like
Yeah.
she's kind of still alive and well in Germany. Um, so here, then I went back to my own name, which at that point was Katia Lief, partly because it was shorter, because
Yeah.
it was the name I was really living as.
Yeah.
And then the Karen Ellis,
Yeah.
that was the idea of my, at the time, new agent, who's still my agent. And he just thought it was his idea.
Yeah.
And
Fresh start. Yeah.
I was not fully sold, but he wanted to do a good job with his sale. You know how this works.
Yeah, I do.
Um,
Right. Right.
and I just went with it. And then so we did the 2 books. And then when I got with Invisible Woman, I felt by then I was like, you know what? I don't like this.
Yeah.
I don't feel comfortable. I don't like it. One name, this is it. This is my name. And they were amazing. They're like, of course.
Yeah.
So I feel that I wish I had been clearer, but what can you do? You can't turn back time. It always, it seemed like a good idea at the time, but I think it created a complexity, levels of complexity. So
Well, and it's funny because I took my husband's name, which was Kraus, and I did not publish under that. Because also I thought, I don't know if I want my children to have the same name as a woman who writes about serial killers. I thought like a little
yeah,
distance is okay. And also because, I mean, in my first book came out in 2000, so this is ages and ages and ages ago. And I used to get mail from the prison. Like, so I just felt like it's okay if the
yeah,
mail goes to my, agent or my publisher under Gerard, and then my
right.
children go to preschool under Crowd, so that felt okay. So,
Good thinking.
well, but of course, nothing, I mean,
Good thinking.
nothing's
Well, when I had the Kate Pepper name, yeah, it did shield me actually, because I did get a ton of mail at the time, um, from different countries, and sometimes it was disturbing a little bit,
Mhm.
a little edgy, disturbing, and um, but that hasn't happened, as much. You kind of can put up firewalls on your email, so people who want to email you,
They
it's
do it right.
they can just find you, and if they're nice, you'll respond, and if they're not, you won't.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, and I don't, because I haven't read any of the Kate Pepper books or the Karen Ellis books. But I am curious because I do think you do this, and of course I'm, in my 50s, early 50s. So this women of this age, grown children, and sort of like where we are looking a little bit back on at least a big part of your career, if not your whole career, right?
Right.
I feels like a very like personal
Oh yeah.
spot for me. But
Yeah.
I'm curious to know if those earlier books, like you really do like the sort of complexity of these women, and they're the fact that they're so devoted to family and as Joni did, raise her kids and sort of and like you did also. It sounds like you took your
Right.
hiatus and your babies were little, and we all did that. I
Yeah.
feel like for different reasons, right? One was economical, right? You can't
Yeah.
couldn't I wasn't supporting the
The
family, so.
problem.
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. But I'm curious about to know, like, this sort of like these aspects of women, have they shown up in your books always, or as you've gotten older, do you find you dig deeper? How has it changed for you?
Yeah, great question. It's always been front and center in my mind, but my first thriller was 5 Days in Summer, by Kate Pepper. And I've reissued it under my name, by the way. So,
Okay. Yeah.
and it was also the early 2000s. It was a really different time. And I I felt a real awareness that I couldn't write really overtly about those issues. That's how I felt. And partly because anyway, I just didn't feel comfortable. But one thing that I always did, because 5 Days in Summer is a serial killer novel, but it's about a family and a woman, and it centers on the woman and her children. And I was always very conscious of wanting of that I would always put the weapon in the woman's hand at the very end.
Right.
So I
No white knight to save her. Yeah.
no, so I always did that. Um, and then when it got to Invisible Woman, I had been thinking about that idea, and then Me Too like happens, and
Yeah.
like this is what I want to write about. I want to. So I felt like a door swung open. Now I can just do it. I can go right into that vein
Yeah.
instead of tiptoeing around it and write about it pretty overtly. And that's what I did. I felt it gave me permission to really write the book that I'd been wanting to write, but not allowing myself to write,
Yeah.
because of the anger, right? And because the anger, and this is something I think all um, have experienced in our lives. The anger was ugly, and
Yeah.
we weren't supposed to feel it.
Right.
And if we did feel it, we weren't supposed to show it. And we really felt, and we were part of that. We didn't, it was a horrible, we all went through it. And I love that that's what you do this podcast about.
Yeah.
What happens? So with Invisible Woman, my question was, what happens to, now that we can talk about the buried rage, right? And Me Too, this happened to me too, and Me Too. We get to say it now. But what happens to all of that internalized rage that all these women, especially the older you are and the more you've internalized over the years, what happens to it? It doesn't just go
Yeah.
away because suddenly you get to talk about it.
No.
It's in there. And so with Joni, it's in there, and it distorts you. It's distorted her. And that's where I went. I wanted
What
to,
I love also about that is that it's, because in many ways, like I have a daughter. I don't know if you have
I have a son and a daughter.
yeah,
Yeah.
me too. I have a son and a daughter. And I noticed with my daughter, like she's much more open about her anger about things the way they happen. And I, as her mother, am much more accepting of that as a natural part of being a woman than I feel like I was and my mother was. And so, but I love the fact that like getting to know Chris as a character, Chris is Joni's daughter, that we get the one that we see the most of. And I feel like getting to know Chris, there isn't that sort of stereotypical like youth rage, right? Because I think nowadays women, women are sort of like labeled, young women are labeled as being so angry because whatever, whatever
Mm,
patriarchy blames that on, whatever. But
right.
but I,
Right.
I I love the fact that in Chris's case, like actually she's quite steady for somebody who's gone through what she's gone through, right? And
Right.
so it just speaks to her maturity and then to the fact that Joni was her mother. And I love that part of it because it gives us a
Good.
sense, it sort of calms the waters of Joni as we see her. Because we do see all the white water and all the tumultuousness and all the anger and all the, but
Yeah.
also knowing that she raised this daughter is reassuring in the sense that, okay, well, she's not all Patricia Highsmith
Right.
crazy, right? You know?
Right. Well, no one's, I mean, some people might be all crazy, but I think most people aren't all crazy.
Right.
And she's not crazy.
No,
She's
no.
angry,
Yeah,
and her
right. There
anger
it is.
distorts them.
That's the
Right? No,
great,
but I know exactly. Yeah. Well, so my kids are closer to the age of Chris, the character Chris.
Mhm.
So what I've seen is that, they grew up with us as their mothers,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And they grew up in a society, they got a little bit of both. They
I
got
agree.
Me Too and after Me Too, but they've really been exposed to this. And they feel, my daughter appeared, I think she feels, entitled to all the emotions she has,
Yeah,
much more so than I did
right.
and my generation did. So I think I kind of transferred that to Chris. They do
Yes.
have an ease um, in themselves that we didn't get to have. It's not complete, and of course, and it's not perfect, by far, but it's better than what we were dealing with.
I
I
agree.
think.
I agree.
Yeah.
Much less, there's much less of the sense that the women will be like, seen and not heard, seen in
Oh
their,
yeah.
in their pantyhose and their lipstick
Yeah.
and not heard.
The pantyhose.
And I love seeing the other, I mean, it's really fun for me to read about mothers and daughters too, obviously, as a mother with a daughter and also mothers and sons, all Joni,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
Val has a son and it's fun to see,
Right.
as he's younger, but as he's growing up too. So I love this sort of complexity and also I mean, the friendship, because as I feel like another thing that is so important to women, which is I perhaps in once our children are launched, the most important thing to
Oh
women
yeah.
is these friendships, right?
Yeah.
These people that
Yeah.
have that know you, even
Yeah.
if they haven't known you as long as Joni and Val, because they've known each other since they were in college, but these women because I think women just they know each other in a way that it's
Oh yeah.
the,
Deeply.
yeah. That I
And
don't think men
yeah.
have that the same way, or not
No,
most.
they don't seem to. I mean, maybe some do.
Yeah, hopefully.
Women, I mean, no, I see that with all my women friends, especially since our kids either have launched or should have launched. I mean, the pandemic, I'll tell
Right.
you, the pandemic really threw a wrench in all that
Yeah.
for my generation of mother and my
Yeah.
parents. Um, but we, you get together with them and you connect in a way, and it's shorthand. You understand, you get it.
Yeah.
And it's magic, really, that
Yeah.
kind of friendship.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's magic.
So,
And it is the idea, like there's that joke, there's always the meme. It's like, if what friend would you call at 2 a.m. when you're like, there's a there's a body I need to dispose of. And that
right,
kind of friendship, which is, part humor and part, reality, I think,
right.
is so powerful. And it was fun. I really enjoyed experiencing two books with Joni and Val, because in the beginning of Invisible Woman, they had been estranged, right? They'd got partners, and there were things that had come between them
Yes.
that may have seemed insurmountable. And so
Right.
I love the fact that theirs is an endure. And I think it's funny because we talk about how you mend, obviously relate like marriages, right? Long marriages always have to go through these, but it happens with friends too, and you have to be willing to, to speak your truth and put aside your,
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, so that was
Yeah.
I really just what a
Good.
pleasure to get to read these books. So
I'm so glad.
I'm super excited for whatever is coming next, and this is your pub day. We're literally we're speaking on the day before Katya's book comes live. So this is so exciting because I know. So what are the plans for pub day? Because I feel like, I mean, I hope you're like there's champagne and all the things.
I'm just going out to dinner with my family. Honestly, that's all I'm
I
doing.
know.
And then I'm, seeing some friends this week. And yeah, no, I have published so many books. This is the thing, that having book launches for me feels redundant in the weirdest way. Um, Not that it's boring to me, but I feel guilty asking people to come out again and again and again. So we're just going to go out to dinner.
Well, as
Simple.
long as it's like a birthday, I feel like you get to treat it like, like another birthday. As far as I'm concerned, and I am like,
It's
I think as a mom, like you get so little things that belong to you. I've always felt like, Christmas is always like everybody's production, but so when it comes to like my birthday and the
yeah,
publication days of my books, I'm like, this day is about me, you know?
that's right.
So I
That's
don't know if there's a pedicure or massage or just like a foot
uh
stroke and, coffee and
no, there should be. And maybe there will be.
there you go. Well, treat yourself. It's
So
super.
yeah, exactly. So
So tell our listeners where to find, where to find you on social
okay,
media, where to find out about where they can get signed copies of the
okay.
books and all that fun stuff.
Okay. Well, my website is my name, katialief.com. Super easy to find me. And all my socials are basically that too. And they're also on my website. So basically head to my website, and that's where you can also find out where to get the books, but you can get them, you can order them anywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for the moment, when a new book comes out, women like us should be in many bookstores. I've already started to see it. It's exciting.
That's so fun.
So yeah, so in bookstores for the new book and online for all the books.
Which is
Yeah.
that's so exciting. And we will have a copy of Women Like Us to give away. And Killer Women Podcast now has its own Instagram page we are trying to give people more options to win the book. So go over and like or follow Killer Women Podcast. That's brand new as of today. I literally just took care of that today. So, and I'm going to spell Katia Lief for you just in case. It's Katialief. And for a long time, I was switching those vowels. So, in case you're like me and slightly dyslexic half of the time, there you go. So, anyway, Katia, what a pleasure to get to talk to you about both your fabulous books. And look at these, like, if you're not watching us, but you're listening on Spotify or something, you got to go check out these books. Joe actually told me the story of how Katya's editor is a good friend of mine, and he told me the story of how they came up with this fabulous cover with the cat clock, which was really fun. So I'm a big fan, and congratulations, and we'll look forward to seeing whatever you do next.
Thank you, Danielle. This has really been fun.
Everyone, this has been Killer Women with Katia Lief, and we will see you next time. Bye.